Ladies and gentlemen, is my friend Dr. James White a terrorist sympathizer, as some people say, or is he providing a fair representation of the Muslims, as others say? Well, first of all, thank you for the question. For many years I've known James and listened to what he has to say. And as you listen, I'll play a few clips for you. You'll notice James seems to want to eliminate the fear that Christians have towards Muslims because it's a barrier to the gospel. I'll play a clip here.
Start with this, that I do not have for a second a belief that Abdullah Kunda wants to do me harm. And if you begin a conversation with the assumption that you're going to be fearful of the person to whom you're speaking, that they might want you to do harm, it's going to change the kind of conversation you're going to have with them. We approach this subject of Islam with fear, then we are going to hesitate to take the opportunities that are presented to us. And if you're scared of someone, you're not going to extend your heart. You're not going to really engage the person in such a way as to show them true Christian love.
Okay, next as you listen here, you'll notice that James thinks it's very important to make distinctions between the Muslim groups.
Know what in the world he was actually saying. They won't. That's not the point. They are just simply so filled with, they're all the same. They all want to put you in the exact same bucket. And I can't do that as a Christian. I do not see how a believing Christian can engage in that. We must be truthful and honest to be consistent with our own profession of faith.
Okay, one thing I do notice is that I've never heard James mention anything about the violent Muslims and why they want to kill people. I've heard James give examples of why we need to make distinctions between groups, and that is because he doesn't want to be associated with Westboro Baptist Church. So we shouldn't lump all Muslims together. But something to keep in mind is that James actually has so much in common with the Westboro Baptist Church. They are Reformed, the Trinity, Jesus, salvation, sola scriptura, by faith alone, on and on and on. Even with the Catholics, James has so much in common. And so it is with the Muslim groups. Allah, the Quran, Muhammad, Sunnah, Muhammad being the example for all of humanity, etc. Now, where did James learn about the Islamic theology? Well, I have a clip I'd like to play for you.
See, I learned my initial training in what shirk was and the categories of it, rububiyyah, so on and so forth, comes from you. Okay, so you're my mentor here.
Also here from another clip.
Most of my understanding of Sahih and Hassan and everything else comes from listening to him in some very unusual contexts. I'm probably the only student he has ever had that has listened to his entire Hadith lectures in cotton spandex shorts.
Okay, so James learned his theology from Dr. Kadi, but listen here and listen for the word Kharijites.
But that one of the reasons that I especially wanted to have him here this evening is when ISIS began to become a tremendous news item, I watched a presentation that he made in Norway where he gave a theological, maybe we'll be able to summarize just a few of the things about the Kharijites and things like that. But
Kharijites. Okay, notice James wants Dr. Yasir Qadhi to tell the audience about Kharijites as an explanation for radical Muslims. So what is James talking about here? Who are the Kharijites? I have a clip for you. Okay, so it seems that James believes Dr. Yasir Qadhi's explanation about ISIS and jihad due to the Kharijites. Well, the clip's a little too long to play, but it's right here in Dr. Yasir Qadhi's lecture. He talks about the Kharijites. So he'll tell you, you'll hear a story about the Kharijites back when Islam first began, when Muhammad was alive, etc. And there was a split in the Muslim community, and it's due to an accusation that Muhammad was not evenly dividing up the war booty. Interesting. So there's a split in the early Muslim community. So the quote-unquote radical Muslims, they killed some of the quote-unquote moderate Muslims at that time. So Muhammad and the so-called moderate Muslims, they wage war against the so-called radical Muslims, and there's lots of bloodshed. So then Dr. Yasser Qadhi, he jumps to the modern day and associates ISIS with these radical Muslims, the Kharijites from the past. Here, listen here. You hear for you. Okay, here it is.
It's the other to exist. The fact of the matter, my dear brothers and sisters, when you look at these fanatical extremist groups, you find the same symptoms that our Prophet ﷺ predicted in the Kharijis of old. These are modern manifestations of those groups. You find amongst them.
Okay, so Dr. Qadhi associates the Kharijites from the past as ISIS today, but he mentions that ISIS may be victims due to American foreign policy. I got a clip for you. Listen here.
Those who kill in the name of Islam than those who kill in the name of power and greed. Yes, wallahi, we are not naive, and I say this as explicitly as possible. It is because of the false invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, it is because of the foreign policy that this country and others have generated, that the circumstances have been created to allow ISIS and Al-Qaeda to come forth. We didn't have ISIS 20 years ago. We didn't have Al-Qaeda with its threats and whatnot 15, 30 years ago. No doubt, this is undeniable reality, and this is not a religious person speaking. This is simple political analysis. Go read any genuine political analyst talking about the circumstances that are needed to create extremism. When these people have seen so much bloodshed, so much lies, when they have been bombed and killed themselves, what happens is the mentality then amongst the overzealous fanatics is, we will do the same unto you what you have done unto us.
So ISIS, the victims, they're just seeking revenge, according to Yasser Qadhi. Now, Dr. Qadhi does go on to say that ISIS is wrong for what they're doing, but why are they wrong for what they're doing? This is the key. He says they're wrong for what they're doing because they give Islam a bad reputation. That's why they're wrong for what they're doing, because they give them a bad reputation. Listen here for yourself.
What their problems were. Brothers and sisters, the damage that these groups are doing to Islam, Israel is not damaging Islam's reputation. Israel is massacring Muslims, that is true. But the reputation of Islam is not being affected by Israel. America is killing, with its foreign policy, so many people, but it's not damaging the perception of Islam. Isn't that the case? But what these people are doing is damaging the religion of Islam.
Okay, and he says it again here.
Allah, in the name of the Sharia, in this brutal manner, innocent people, how many thousands have been killed, my dear brothers and sisters? And wallahi, we need to be as vocal as possible for the sake of our religion, for the sake of the perception, not
for the sake of our religion and for the perception of our religion. This is the conclusion that Dr. Yasser Qadhi gives to show that the extremists are wrong. Why? Because it gives Islam a bad reputation. And he says it again in this next clip that James White defends. Here it is.
Jihad is a legitimate term, it's a noble term, we shouldn't be ashamed of it. But those groups that misuse and abuse the term jihad, we should be brave enough to stand up for the sake of Allah and criticize them, because they're harming the real jihad much more than any non-Muslim can ever harm it. May Allah...
And again, the conclusion, because they make Islam look bad. You know, and James goes on to defend Dr. Qadhi here in this video. Notice Dr. Qadhi says the reason why jihad is bad is because it gives Islam a bad reputation. And James's defense is that Dr. Qadhi is taken out of context. People take him out of context in this video. But the context that they failed to mention is that jihad must be fought with a caliph. That's all. So it seems that James really believes Dr. Qadhi. You know, James learned a lot, we've heard, of Muslim theology from Dr. Qadhi. And Dr. Qadhi, he condemns other Muslims that make Islam look bad. So obviously Dr. Qadhi's goal is to make Islam look good, and it seems that James believes him. Okay, in this next clip, you'll hear James talk about if you do this, that, and the other, and such, then the Muslims will love to listen to you.
I can disagree with you openly and firmly, but as long as I have demonstrated to you that I want to honor you by accurately representing you, you folks are the best people in the world to talk to. I have been in mosques, not just here in the United States, but in South Africa. 1 week after the Benghazi embassy attack, I was debating, is Muhammad prophesied in the Bible in the East London Mosque? And the Muslims there loved it. And I had to say some strong things. But my experiences with Muslims, if you have shown them the respect of accurately representing what they believe, then you can honestly disagree. And they'll listen and they'll talk. And we live in a day, I tell my Christian community, we live in a day where we have to break our backs to get secularists to talk to us. And here's a whole group of people that want to talk to us, but we're not talking. What a tragedy. Trying to change it, but I'm just one funny looking guy in a bow tie.
Okay, so there's two things I notice here in this clip. One, James says they're willing to listen and talk to you if you do such and such. Why doesn't James just say, go and talk to the Muslims and be yourself? But rather, if you do this, accurately represent and respect them. And what does this mean? Well, it means to represent their position in the way that they want you to represent their position. So what if they want you to represent their position as peaceful people, as a religion of peace? Interesting. Also, if people want to listen to you, does that mean that they don't want to kill you? Of course not. It just means they're interested in hearing what you have to say. Should we conclude, oh, they want to listen to me. They love me. I'm not so sure. And another thing, notice he brushes right over the fact that there was just an attack before he went to the East London Mall. Okay, James wants to respect the Muslim people and accurately represent them. But how does he think of most Christians? Well, let's listen here.
That I've said many times that I think if you went to most conservative Bible-believing Christian churches on a Sunday morning and gave their people a quiz on the doctrine of the Trinity, I don't know what percentage would pass it, but it would not be more than 50%, and it would probably be less than that. There is a lot.
And he says it again here.
If I were to give a quiz after the Sunday morning service at most Protestant churches in the United States on the doctrine of the Trinity, I don't have much of a confidence that more than 25% would pass it.
So what he says is most Christians don't even know the doctrine of the Trinity. What else does he have to say about Christians? I have another clip for you. Okay, here it is.
As it is Christians just being so gullible in the things that they say and the things that they post.
Okay, so what is he saying here? Oh, Christians are gullible. So he makes sure to respect the Muslims and accurately represent them. But when it comes to the Christians, even though he admits he doesn't know how many know the doctrine of the Trinity, if he gave them a quiz, more than half would not even know the doctrine of their own Trinity. And that Christians are gullible. Well, I think Christians would say that James is being inconsistent in the way that he treats the Muslims and how he treats the Christians. And I just wanted to point that out since he says that he always tries to be consistent. Okay, in this next clip, James indicates that the Muslims are being discriminated against because at the airport the security inspected his Quran. Listen.
Dr. Cotty, why that would be. But 2 times I got to my hotel and I opened my checked luggage, and here's that little piece of paper that says we've checked your luggage. And guess where it was?
Right
2 times.
The copy of the Quran.
Right in the middle of the Arabic Quran. Now, when it happened the first time, I was just sort of like, but when it happened a second time, obviously someone is sending me a message, very clearly sending me a message. Now, I want every Christian in the room to imagine if you are in a minority position religiously in a country, and you got to your hotel, and that inspection thing was inside your Bible, what would you interpret that to mean? How would you understand that? So with that, what's it like to be a Muslim in America post 9/11?
Where does one begin?
James, I have a strong feeling that you recognize that all rational people discriminate. This is why we put warning labels on poisonous items. So why is it that the airport security is discriminating against people who read the Quran? Is it all a big conspiracy? Or is it a rational deduction? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the questions. After my investigation, I've concluded for you that James is not a terrorist sympathizer. I think that's going a little too far. And I also think that he is not accurately representing the Muslim community as a whole as well. But it simply seems to me that James just wants to accurately represent the Muslim position. And the Muslim position that James has learned is from people who want Islam to look commendable to the public, you see. And being tolerant and peaceful is commendable to the public. Now, James may believe what he learned from the Muslims, that they are tolerant and peaceful, and because this is how the Muslims want to be represented. So does this mean that the Muslims really are tolerant and peaceful? Well, this question we have not even attempted to answer in this video. But thank you so much for watching. And if you have any more questions or want me to check out anybody else, please let me know.